Are we? There we go.
There we
Yes.
go.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. We're finally here. It wouldn't be a reverie stream without some technical difficulties. This is the first time me, Wolf, is fully managing the stream myself, so apologies for the delay here, but we are ready to fully head into this. We'll just let some people come in for the next 2 minutes, say hi to everyone. How is everyone in chat doing today? How are you feeling about the glorious and most beautiful ReZero Day?
I mean, I'm feeling pretty good about it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Oh.
so happy everyone's finally here. Wolf and I were lucky enough to be able to see this a few months ago at Anime X, and it did not. That wait was hard to let everyone else catch up. I'll be honest. Like, it was rough not being able to properly talk and share in that experience with almost anyone. But everyone's here now. It's great. We love it. Anyone in chat, if our audio is wrong, anyone's too loud or too quiet, let us know so we can fix that sooner than later.
Let's see
But-
here. Freddy says, doing good. It was an amazing episode and a great day to have off. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome to have the day off so you can watch ReZero like 10 times in a row. The same episode over and over again.
15 hours.
Yeah,
Jeez.
good times. In a random segue before we get onto that, I guess, while we're waiting for a couple of people to go in. On the topic of that, have you guys ever rewatched an episode of ReZero? Has it ever came out like multiple times?
Just on its own,
Yeah.
I think once with the finale. I think I rewatched that one right away.
Ooh, that's really cool.
Oh, do you mean like have you ever rewatched it after watching it immediately?
Yeah, just to like do it again.
Actually, like it's pretty crazy. I think I literally rewatch ReZero quite often because it's relevant to everything that we're doing right now and stuff like that, but also because sometimes somebody new sees it and I'm like, oh, I want to check out what they think about it. And usually that kind of reinvigorates me back in. I always pick up on new little details and they worm their way into my head.
So the only time I've ever rewatched an episode right after watching it was actually Parent and Child, back in season 2. That episode just hit so good for me. I spent a good chunk of my afternoon just watching it like 6 times back to back again and again. I'm just like, man, I really appreciate this episode. This is really what I wanted from this. And yeah, it just hit.
A lot
Actually-
of the climax episodes help with it.
I guess in hindsight, this wasn't coming out live at the time. I was late for season 1 and most of season 2. But episode 15, it's not called Flash of Sloth, is it? Like the first time we meet Betelgeuse? I had to go back and rewatch that whole episode start to finish again because I was not paying close enough attention and realized, how did he get in this cave?
Oh, I remember you telling me about this. This was before the point you'd fully locked in, right? And you were just more casually watching?
But now I'm like fully locked in. My phone's off, curtains closed.
Yeah!
Like its full attention is on ReZero for 90 minutes straight. Oof.
Oh,
Feature length.
yeah.
Feature length. And it deserved it too.
It
It
did.
really needed it.
And such a great way to handle this part of the adaptation too, in my opinion, of like getting it all out in one episode in like that time constraint, cutting what they needed to make it flow well and get that cliffhanger in there. Mwah!
Yeah, they were really like, the internet's fickle and we can't let them slander the series just by having it drag on for this establishing part of it.
Well, the actual reason, according to the director at the Q&A
Yeah.
at AX, was he couldn't imagine having a season of ReZero start without Subaru dying in it at least once. So we had to make sure we got to it, and
I think that's true, honestly.
oh, for
It
sure.
wouldn't feel right, you know?
No, you're like, well, is this the same show? He just didn't even die, so we just gonna skip right to that.
It's too happy, right? And people,
Mhm.
because especially the fact that it's been, I don't know, 3 years since the last one.
Oh my
When
God.
people remember
Four now.
Four,
four
yeah.
now, and when people remember ReZero tonally, thematically and stuff like that, reintroducing one with a happy episode, people will be like, "Is this what the series was about? Is this what it made me feel like?" You know, and I think that's very true, right? When you want to make sure that people remember the themes of the show, you kind of have to hunker down and let them kind of absorb this establishing part of the arc.
It really is. And honestly, like I know myself and a lot of other people have like a 3 episode rule where they'll give a show 3 episodes, and if it doesn't hook them by then, they're going to drop it. And I can imagine that if season 3 had started with just 3 episodes of they're hanging out at the mansion, now they're getting to the city and meeting friends, now they're having uh okiaki, oh, I can't ever say the original word, but they changed it to I love yaki
Yes.
in Lagunica. Uh Having that for a whole episode, and then we finally get one where things get intense at episode 4, it wouldn't have clicked. So it's really great that they made this decision. It's going to keep everyone excited because you hear, oh, ReZero starting with a 90-minute premiere, and then
It's a big
you're just
boy.
sitting there. You sit there and you enjoy it for 65 minutes until Heinkel ends up emotional catharsis blocking his relatives.
Yep. You know,
And we get the mysterious Sirius Romani Conti in her theatrical debut.
theatrical malice.
For sure. And honestly, it's one of those things where I think like there's so much character dialogue and character interaction to kind of force in that it's like, it's very funny because Heinkel's moment in this episode feels, I mean, the characters feel the same about it as I think that most of the audience feels like, which is just like, why are you here? Like, what's going on? And then
Who's this
we're like,
guy?
yeah,
Go away. We were having
go
a cool
away.
moment.
Yeah, like, well, what is this about? Like, Amelia's like, hey, can you just tell me why you're here?
One of my friends is going to be extremely disappointed when Heinkel shows up because after seeing the trailer, he was under the assumption that Reinhard spends enough time like sad or something and grows a beard.
Oh, they didn't catch that, did they?
They didn't realize it was 2 people, so that's going to be really funny.
Oh, that's
One
so
of-
funny.
One of the things is like in anime it's very rare for somebody to have a beard. So I think like, when characters have beards in anime, it becomes like, oh, is this a sign of character growth? It's a character progression. I think that's very funny.
It is. But let's like start going over everything. So, Gold, this is your first time watching the episode, right?
Yes.
What
It is my
are
first time, just like a lot of you in chat, right?
I would say the vast majority of people in the world should have been the first time watching.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking at all of you guys. Surely none of you guys pirated this episode. Unwise.
And I know that there was only a limited. The line to get into this one for the premiere
Oh
was
my
ooh.
god. Yeah.
They cut off people really quick. So if you didn't get in that first 10 minutes, then you were out.
It
But
was rough.
what were your thoughts, Gold?
You know what? I thought it was very, very good. I think this is the type of substantial art style and stuff like that I feel like ReZero always should have had. The character designs especially. When you think about it, I think
Oh,
it's
yeah.
rather wise for it to be so focused on character design over anything else because
Yes.
getting character impressions out is mostly what the story is about, right? So getting expression work down, getting directing down, all of that's more important than fluidity or movement or anything like that. Even though that helps, obviously, it's animated. Everything is animated. I think one of the biggest flaws with season 1 and especially season 2 is how kind of squished or how like off model a lot of the faces what looked, right?
It's very
Yeah, it
inconsistent.
didn't seem exactly not between like scenes or almost like locations had different looks to the characters, especially in
Yes.
season 2.
It's because it would be different. I imagine the reason why is it'd be different teams working on it, right?
Probably.
Yeah, and the lighting in this episode especially feels very appropriate. The backgrounds look very pretty and beautiful. Probably the most beautiful that they've ever looked, if I had to wager.
Oh yeah.
100%.
A lot of
100%.
people have always complained a bit about the production of ReZero's backgrounds. I think Pristella looks very well realized. There's not a single scene where I was like, this looks a bit, you know. and that obviously is great. Every voice actor, of course, knocks their socks out every single time, and the score is great as always. As somebody who's already known the content of the story, there's nothing like new that's popping out at me. There's a few things that they didn't include, or some pacing things which I think are good. As we talked about, like the fact that they got us all done in an hour and 30 minutes is commendable.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't necessarily there's not a huge moment in this where I've been like, oh, the director really popped off or anything like that. There's a lot of like very nicely concise scenes that I think, puts the story together in a very digestible way. Like a lot of the cutaways, like there's a few moments in which, for example, Otto talking about all the candidates and flash to all their scenes, which I think is very nice.
Mm.
I think a lot of the ways in which, for example, Garfield remembers Elsa, and there's the moment everything goes stark
Oh
blood
yeah,
red, and
his
then
PTSD scene.
yes,
Yeah.
PTSD scene is nice, and of course there's a lot of like gently done character driven scenes, which I think are executed very well. Of course, accompanied by good voice acting and music helps it a lot. Um, yeah, I mean, I think this was as delicately done as possible. People would probably have a few complaints, and if they do, it's usually just like, hey, why? Not every moment that's just dialogue focused or anything like that needs to be super high production, and I understand that. So I think any complaints about this hour and 30-minute episodes, I'd kind of look at with a grain of salt, honestly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Everything
Really?
seems really on model. Everything seems very well produced, so I can't really.
Oh yeah, Sean hit on one of the
Yeah.
things I
Yeah.
really wanted to mention here of just the updated character designs, not even just the higher effort and consistency between them, but all of the improvements, let's just say explicitly improvements of all the character designs through from everyone, whether it's as just making Petra slightly taller since it's been a year, fixing Subaru's face, or making Anastasia actually look like an adult.
Yes.
It's all good,
Yeah,
and especially Liliana.
Especially
Oh my
Liliana.
god.
Oh my god.
100%. One thing that I wanted to point out as well is because I was praising the character designs a whole bunch, and I will continue to do so. But it just makes sense from both a artistic perspective, but also a like it's more resembling the light novel designs. They're more consistent, and the faces expressions are more uh, defined, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, and it makes sense not only in a direction point and accuracy point. I think it also helps um, people, like for example, ReZero's biggest thing is merchandise, right? These
Hmm.
characters look more distinct and more realized than ever before. So I think they kind of recognize they need to focus on making sure people remember these characters when they see them. Like even Julius has different eyes now,
Yes,
different like
Gasified.
his eyelashes were so pronounced that the day after the premiere, when we were still at AX, I had Kyle literally give me eyeliner and eyelash extensions to match the character better.
yeah, exactly right. Like that's the thing that they would have overlooked in the past. I think like that is very important. Obviously, like every body shape and body type is slightly different in this. I think that's something that they kind of focused on, like especially because they're all wearing different clothing too, and when they're in the yukata, especially, you can
Hmm.
tell the difference in the character design and how the character designer sees it because of the way in which when the characters change, they all have unique shapes and unique faces and unique, whatever, and it's a far cry from, I would say like a lot of angles, even directorially, kind of made it so that the body types, the body shape, the way that the characters acted facially didn't really matter much. Like everyone, there's a lot of like great, like quickly, produced scenes that are very intense and color graded in a way that's, dark and, mysterious.
Hmm.
Nice angles in the first season that people praise very heavily the director for. Um, but I think this season so far, I mean, with an hour 30-minute episode, I actually have a lot to go on so far. Um, gives a lot of definition to the characters and puts their design on display in ways in which the previous seasons didn't. Um, and I think that that is important because obviously this hour and 30 minutes is focused entirely on the characters. So I praise that very heavily.
Yeah, a lot of times it did feel like he was just taking this chance to show off his coworkers' hard work and saying like, "Look at this
Yes.
amazing new design we have for
There's a
everyone."
lot of cut pan shots. There's a lot of like, very obvious focal shots on the characters doing little cute expressions. And, I mean it when I say there's not like one off-model shots. I mean, everybody will obviously point to like, hey, I mean, this will happen until the end of time. Look, I found a character's face from far away looking weird. It's always going to happen. There's
Yep.
no end to that. But other than
There's
that,
a few scenes at the big table where the people who
Yes.
aren't talking just kind of have this silly grin on their face, but it's like very clearly not out of focus, but your eye isn't drawn to that.
It's
The only
mostly
reason I'm even
background.
catching anything, yes, was because I'd already seen the episode, and so I was literally looking for, all right,
and
what did we
movie
overlook last
and
time?
quality,
Yeah,
yeah.
what did me and you miss while we were just absorbed in the episode and could focus on the minute details, right?
And like, there's a few more scenes of CGI that I didn't see the first time. I also caught that Beatrice mimics Subaru's expressions a lot of the time when
Yes.
he's talking and
Yeah,
she's
I did
not.
notice that.
It's great. Beatrice, as I said in our other reaction stream to this episode, the only complaint I had about the entire episode, like not a genuine complaint, but like the thing I would go online and say like, I wish they would have done this, was they cut a scene of Subaru flicking her toe with her just milking it for attention. That's it. That was the only thing that upset me.
And I think the ad-lib section scene we got with her in the yukata was actually, even though it's not the same, and having both at the same time would be oh so glorious. Having that filled my heart with joy.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the best ad-lib scenes I think I've ever seen in an anime, like ever.
Yeah, 100%. I think like all the character performances obviously are just like beyond the pale. Everyone's having so much fun here. I can tell. That's something that I wonder if, and I don't know because I can't ask them, and they probably won't say it independently. I wonder if a lot of the people know the length of these characters' arcs and importance and where they're going to go in the future. Especially like, for example, if you're Julius's voice actor or Beatrice's voice actress or all these people's voice actress, and you know what happens, like say arc 6, right, or in arc 7. And we're not going to talk about that, but like
Yeah.
you probably get like so much more out of trying to understand these characters in these small nuanced moments.
It's
Well, this season especially, they would have the benefit of having so much prepared past where the season's going that they can give them more in-depth character details too. Because season 3, they don't even have, or season 2 finishes, they don't even have arc 6 done yet. It's like there's barely anything past where they are for like real important character stuff for them. And season 1 anime passed the light novels. So this is the first time where we have light novels up to arc 8 when they're doing all the production, that they can really get a lot of good details for where they're at and beyond.
Yeah, and honestly, it's great because like there's a lot of characters that are introduced or we're reintroducing to the audience, right? And this is, I mean, people forget, but this is obviously the first time in which these characters actually feel like actual full-fledged, full fleshed out, characters with their own desires and personality. We were so focused on Amelia's camp for a while that, as a lot of these characters are being reintroduced to Subaru, the audience is being reintroduced to them as people with entirely fleshed out and interesting backstories or dilemmas or perspectives, and this is the genesis of that. Of course there's always going to be stuff that's tied in backstories and side story content that sadly people are going to miss because it's an anime adaptation, right? And we're not going to be able to cover all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel glad being able to see these guys realized on screen, and I know that the writing is done with that carefulness in mind anyways. So hopefully people like it comes across a lot, right? And people are excited to learn more about these characters.
All right. Well, I think that's a good point to let us just start talking on the episode then. So, like, I know the big thing for us when we finished the premiere before was Liliana and the
Yes.
vast change in how she's shown, presented, and played in the anime versus in the web novels versus like actually reading and even Wolf's interpretation, quote unquote, of her. Of just, oh my god, I love her so much in the
Yes.
anime. She's so funny. Her VA kills it. The music is beautiful. I genuinely can't get enough of her in the show.
I
It
I am baffled that the version of Liliana I used to read is a character I can now enjoy, and just every single time she's on screen saying something dumb, singing something dumb, or doing something dumb, I am laughing so hard, and I
it's
just
silly
didn't do that
because
before.
yeah, because beforehand when you're reading it, it's hard to believe, right? Because a lot of her charm relies on the fact that she's immensely talented, obviously, but she has this sort of silly sort of, but like also her conviction is something that you can't translate that hard. Like, when she's talking to Priscilla in this episode, you see another side to her where you're like, oh, this person is just a true artist, and that's something that you can't appreciate from that perspective when you're only reading lines and lines of her dumb dialogue being silly and goofy, or
With
like
no
her sighs.
melody to
Yeah,
back up the words at all, so you just get raw translations of the lyrics.
yeah, because you can't put that in your head. So that coupled with obviously just like there's a charming goofiness to it that doesn't come across, right? You get the idea that she's a klutz, but it's a fun klutz that you, the audience, don't feel as annoyed by as the characters because you aren't personally experiencing it. Wherein, as you're reading it through the book, it feels like you're personally experiencing her annoyingness.
Hmm.
So you get to appreciate her from this voyeuristic perspective in the anime production because it's done so well. The voice actress inhabits her perfectly, and it's less annoying, it's less creepy, it's less you know hard to grasp.
Yeah. Because like before, all of us are in Beatrice's position in that scene where she's just looking at the two of them rapping together, dumbfounded at the ridiculousness of it all.
Yeah.
And now I feel like I'm more Subaru there, of like wanting
Yes.
to jump in on
Play
just the
along with the
really catchy
chaos.
song.
I one other thing we learned as a quick side from Anime Expo, which we've said in the previous stream, but I just want to reiterate here because it's great. The voice actor for Sue, he that scene he did with Liliana where he did that rap, he did that in one take.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah,
Yes.
that's so crazy.
Well, a lot of
It's
these guys are just like such consummate professionals that like I have no doubt that a lot of these people, I mean, some of the best voice actors around are capable of just banging out lines like this, no issue, naturally. And I mean, of course, Subaru's voice actor the most. I mean, he knows this character probably better than anybody else.
yeah,
Um,
I wouldn't be surprised if Tappei has talked to Yusuke about even more stuff that we haven't done before or
So
haven't seen before ourselves.
from my
yeah,
impression, from the very little interviews I have read, it seems to me that the most of the cast do not read ahead, like at all, for the Japanese production at least. But I know Tappei directs them a lot with character work, so I imagine Tappei has probably specifically singled out Yusuke and Ria Takahashi in particular to just be like, yo, 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 this is what we're doing. This is the general direction of where this is going. I have a feeling he also doesn't go into too much detail because he wants to keep it a surprise. Because in that way, it's almost fresh for them too, right? Because like, say if you're if you're playing this character, right, and something happens in the scene that you're not expecting, that surprise can add an extra element to your voice work.
I mean, only if they're reading the script blind though.
Yeah.
And Sean, all right, before you slander my name, that song was technically about an age gap, not about underage love.
Yes.
So let's just make things a little clear on that point.
it's so funny because I don't even think Super recognized what she was implying when she sang that.
I just don't think he cared.
Maybe.
I think he was trying to get past it, and then she kept on reiterating his nickname after, and he was getting very moody about
Yeah,
it.
because I was gonna say he gets annoyed then. He's like, okay, can you stop calling me that?
Yeah, because that's at that point directed at him. You're right. He may not have realized that she was actually singing about him rather than just a song. But
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
uh,
she's like, "Oh, I have a song coming up," and then she's like,
Just reading through a couple chat things here. Eli Fretty mentions it wasn't as overt saying it's been over a year since he felt death. I feel like that was kind of a missed detail. I don't know. I thought the scene where he kind of joked about it was like pretty clear that that's what he meant. Like I haven't died in a year, right?
mhm.
Yeah, I do think that they might touch on a bit more at the start of the next episode, but
Yeah,
we'll see
yeah,
about
yeah.
it.
We'll see about it.
Because it might just be like a moment where you reframe it at the start of the next episode, so you get right into that emotion that Suber's going to be experiencing as he tries to get back there. I think like it's true. Like everybody knows that the year time skip happened. I do think that like the year time skip is ephemeral right now, and I think they had to cut it like that because even if there's a lot of side content that happens in between, arc 4 and arc 5, and they didn't adapt any of it. It might as well have not never happened to anybody who watched the anime so far. Um, a lot of it's
Mhm.
not entirely relevant until later, I'm guessing. But like again, I think one thing that's going to happen in the story, and this is just inevitability of the adaptation at this point, is that they're going to accrue what I would say is anime debt, where you cut and cut and cut for time and for production and for making a 20-minute episode as concise as possible, and you start not including certain scenes, and then eventually it catches up to you where you're like, hey, didn't you need to explain that earlier, or when shouldn't that have been mentioned then? And then eventually you're gonna have to fill them back in somehow. And I'm not sure when they're gonna do that. Because again, it depends on how long the series goes for, obviously. But there's, things with, you know, the way in which the witches stuff is going and stuff like that. But it's all stuff to happen in due time.
Mhm. There's one scene that we were expecting notably to be included in this episode that wasn't. Now that we know break time is happening, I'm fully expecting it to be included in one of those as just a season one drop the ball. We don't have a good place to put it in season three
Yeah.
moment. But if anyone at home is listening and you're anime only, I would advise to look for Arc 3 cut content, specifically about a carriage ride, and you'll get the understanding of something that's relevant and missing, but won't be There's another chance for them to include it in the main season later on.
Yes.
Yeah,
We'll see.
it
There are
won't be
multiple
relevant this
opportunities.
season technically, but it's gonna be very important later. So I just, it's one of those things.
Well, it's addressed in dialogue
Yeah.
towards the end of the end of this arc, so it
Yeah.
needs to come up at least probably at some point. But if they just don't address it, then they won't address it, and we'll just have to move on.
And of course, we all have our own headcanons about what they're going to do and what they aren't going to adapt in terms of side content. There's like always a chance that like they just do a random episode here or there in the future. Like, say if they're saying yes, we're going to do Arc 7 100% after this is done because this is of third season or whatever, and then it's like, okay, well, you're going to have to at least adapt some of these scenes that are going to be relevant in that. So when do you do it? Do you do it in an actual episode? Do you do an OVA? Who knows? It's like it's one of those things to think about.
One thing to think about too, I think, because a lot of people sometimes don't always fully think about the context of this. I do not envy the anime production for that situation, because when season one was made, it was made as a one season anime. There was
Yeah, it's a one and done.
no intent to have future stuff. So
And
when
you
it
have
came
no
to the cutting
clue.
room floor, foreshadowing for something that's like 6 arcs down the line isn't
That didn't even
really
exist yet.
didn't even exist yet. Isn't really on the top of your priorities, right? And I
Yeah, you have no
understand why that was on the
clue
cutting room floor.
whether or not the anime will be a success, if the studio making the anime will be around, how much money it will make, etc., etc. Of course, ReZero makes the most money of almost any anime, so that is not an issue anymore. But at the time, they had no clue of knowing that, so it's really it's one of those things where the foresight wasn't
Yeah,
there, and how could you blame them really?
Yeah,
Because
which
there's
is understandable. And
and
a
then
because this
million.
episode hits 90 minutes exactly, like it's 90 minutes
yes,
and 31 seconds on Crunchyroll, including credits, in that hindsight, there's not a moment to put that explanation in
There is not.
without cutting out something else.
Well, because the other thing as well is because a lot of the time, this is especially true in the anime as well, because it's just how it happens as a transference to visual medium, right? But a lot of Subaru's inner narration is cut, and we get very small amounts of it when it's relevant, right? But that was like one of the main things that cuts down the time for the volume they were adapting for this episode in particular, of like, how do we get this concise in this 1 hour 30-minute time span, right? Because you've also got to think of it like this: if this was split into 3 anime episodes of, say, like,
Probably
what,
4.
it would have to
Honestly.
be 4, right? Because if it was split into 3, it'd be like, what, 23, 24 minutes each, and
It would be 30 minutes each, which they wouldn't do. So it would be 4 22-minute episodes, give or take.
yeah, which just is a thing of also, like, that's going to really drag if, for instance, you haven't watched ReZero in years, right? And you haven't recapped yourself in any sort of way. You haven't rewatched anything, and you come into the episode and it's this sort of thing which I love, but I know a lot of people would at first find boring, maybe. Not in a way that I think is, like, I personally agree with it, but I can understand where that mindset could come from.
Episode 2 would have been the most boring episode of ReZero in existence,
Yeah.
honestly,
So-
if that had been the case.
It
100%.
did such a good job of making the directional choices in this episode make me very encouraged for the rest of the production, because I want to talk about this in general with you guys and chat too, like, hear your opinions on this, because it's really interesting. I feel a lot of the directional changes, not even just visually, like, I'm talking like all aspects of the production, just are things that I don't think we've really seen in a lot of ways in the previous 2 seasons. So some stuff I want to highlight with that is, right, as you guys were mentioning the character design stuff a lot earlier too, right? And one of my biggest issues with the previous 2 seasons of the show is that all of the character designs felt too surgical to me. It's probably the best way to describe it. Everything felt too uniform, too similar. And now I feel like everyone has their own distinct, like,
Oh,
shape
like between the characters.
between the characters, yeah. Well, now everyone
Yes.
has that distinct shape, that distinct, oh, I can see their silhouette and immediately know who that is, right? And that really helps. But some of the other things that I think are really cool and I want to draw attention to here is specific directional choices when it comes to stuff like exposition. So, as you mentioned earlier, with that scene with Otto Gold, with the cutaways, that's not something that's done very often in the previous 2 seasons. And it's a directional choice that I think makes the exposition a lot easier to watch in this episode than I found the exposition to be in previous episodes of the show.
Yeah, I agree.
Which,
Although there's some of it that it feels like, all right, you're just kind of yammering on, like maybe a bit, but it is also in character for Subaru and Amelia to need that
No.
level of.
not only is it in character, we're coming at this from the aspect of super fans, right? Again, if you're a casual
Yeah.
watcher, you need that extra reinforcement sometimes for the exposition.
That's what I saw it as too. The reason why it's so densely done, and the reason why a lot of these character moments are touched upon so like extensively, is because, as you said, it's 1 hour 30 minutes exactly, and in that production length, you have to touch on all these characters. That if you do not touch upon them properly or enough, that it'll like the ripple effect, the butterfly effect will go out of control, and you'll be like, okay, does this because if we didn't include this scene with what's his name, Ratchins, right, or whatever, would we have enough care about when Ratchins does this or that later on in the season, or Reinhardt helps them or this, or when he shows back up in the next few loops or whatever, and it's the same with every character. It's like, if we don't have a moment with, Otto going ahead and going off to drink or whatever, or explaining the way that the city is laid out, would this mystery be as in fact impactful? Would this moment where you see what this character is up to, resonate, or would the people remember it? Stuff like that. And I think they have a hard, puzzle to solve, which is, how do we keep all these characters' paths moving in a way that is not only like, quality, but also recognizable to an audience that hasn't had these characters in their brain for the past 6 years. or however
Yeah.
long it's
We
been
have
since season 1.
we have 13 new or not new characters that we haven't seen since season 1 that were barely brought up, and then with the exception of like Crucia's camp
Yes.
and Julius, who all had to have their moments to not only talk or reintroduce themselves, but have the chance to reintroduce their character motives, characterization, all that. We also had to then introduce Kiritaka, Liliana,
Heinkel.
Schultz, Heinkel, the entire new city itself, Subaru's updated
Sirius.
relationship, give Sirius her moment. There's a lot they had to pack in, and
had
they
to
did
juggle so
just
much.
such a good job with giving everyone their moment to shine. Because
Yes.
sometimes you wouldn't think, okay, we're going to have to include a scene with Felix here. What's it going to be? Oh, he's going to make Crush freak out about having bad intentions, and that's going to remind you everything you need to know about the relationship between those two.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I just had a smile on my face the
Oh
entire
my God.
time, all the way up until Heinkel kicks in the door.
And it's a thing that I'm really I'm proud of this production team in a lot of ways, is that before in the production side for season 1, season 2, I felt that uniformity, less so in season 2 obviously because of the working conditions for that season, which was completely outside of their control. I have this feeling that everything is working together. So there's many scenes throughout the episodes where we see Otto in a comedic moment, like where he's about to introduce himself and Julius bows to Beatrice and he gets completely sidelined.
to meet you, great spirit, finally.
Yes, and you see his face throughout that scene and after that scene, and they've just made the visual comedic storytelling, in particular the direction here, so much better. I think it really, the jokes are hitting all the time for me. Like I'm genuinely laughing at everything.
Yeah, I would say that the character interactions are more clear and concise than ever before. Whether it's the expressions the character makes or the way that characters react to a thing that they say, it
Yeah.
feels more authentic than ever. Like their expressions, the way that the camera cuts for the joke or whatever, or the way that they just feel more authentic the way that characters express themselves. Like I can't point to a single moment because we don't have the episode up or anything like that, but like it felt making a cute face at Reinhard or whatever, or that or this. It's like it just feels more, or like Garfield posing with Mimi and stuff like that. It feels more authentic than ever before.
Yeah, because it's also that thing too, right? Of like I want to commend the voice acting in particular here because I think it's the best yet out of the series. Some of the voice direction in some of these scenes is so good. I can't remember the specific context, but there's a particular moment where Subaru is elongating what he's saying at the end of a sentence in a really joyful, upbeat manner, and the way that was directed and the way Yusuke pulled that off just really pulled together that scene of like, oh my god, like the emotive expressiveness, and not only in what we're seeing in animation visually, but in terms of voice, it's so good. There's really cool moments of sound design. The two particular moments of the sound design that are just amazing in this episode for me are the moment where Garfield feels the presence of Reinhard, and you see his like eyes dilate, and you hear that like thumping noise of like almost like his heartbeat is what it felt like to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing I want to mention is the sound of chains for Sirius's stuff with Losbel at the end of this episode. Oh my god, it's echoing in my brain. Like, so well done.
Like I remember we mentioned that we got literal chills from
chills.
the sound of it moving around behind her like that, and just like the sound of it dragging him back in
Oh my
was,
God,
or like
yeah.
it wasn't the drag, it was the hit on him, right?
Yeah, because when
Where she throws the hook back.
where she reconnects the chain to the chain she's wrapped him up with, and you hear the clank and the almost, right, like the thump. Oh my god.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
We so let's
Sorry, just gonna.
No, I'm also just back reading all of chat.
Yeah. Oh, hey, Danatos. I'm doing great, actually. Oh, it's so awesome to see you here. Hey, dude. How are you doing? Oh, you really enjoyed the episode, eh? Fuck yeah. I told you it was going to be good, didn't I? I fucking told you. it was really cool watching the first half of this episode and then comparing the scenes in the anime to what I had envisioned in my head while listening to you guys fan dub the novel. Yeah, that I guess is another angle to even think about here. How do you guys feel after being involved in the production of like Reverie at all? Like, how does it feel to watch that, and then like how does that compare? Like,
I know I was extremely validated hearing Kiritaka's official VA go the route that I went, particularly for him. That it just made my heart soar that I just understood the character well enough for that.
Yeah, if you guys don't know, been dubbing this arc for years now. So
We have. It
really,
is done. We have
it's
dubbed the arc.
we have dubbed it, and the thing with that is that it becomes a lot more intimate to you, all the scenes. In fact, I know this arc way too well to detail, because
yes,
not only did we dub it once, we dubbed it twice, and then in between then, people talk about the arc and whatnot, and there was a lot of anticipation between some chapters and such like that. So really, every moment of this arc is choreographed in my head personally as a reader, right? That being said, it feels exactly as I would expect it to be, and that is not a disservice. That's not saying like, oh, they didn't blow my expectation out of the water. No, this is what I want. This is what I wanted it to be. You know what I mean?
yes, yeah, I know
And
what you
that's the
mean.
best compliment I could give, honestly.
Because genuinely, it's also a thing of when you get to really love this series in particular. There is something that just hits different about having these small moments that in a lot of other anime don't really hit too much for me, of just the way these characters interact with each other, the way the particular score comes in at that particular scene, because there is such a good music direction of, oh, is this a new song, or oh, this is a reprise of an old song or an old song, and it fits perfectly there, like the atmosphere that I'm feeling. It's like everything I expected, but as you say, not in a disservice way, not in a lack of creativity or imagination way. This is everything we deserved and wanted. God damn it.
Mm-hmm. And there's so much attention to detail made with all of it as well. Like Andre's bringing this up in chat, but like the sound of the bell on the clock tower ringing at the exact amount of time that it should after Liliana says her repetitive phrase first. He loops back to before she says it the first time, and then the bell comes in right as the title card hits, just to have that timed out so precisely, and knowing that that is the exact moment he returns to and then coming back. It's just, I mean, it's chef's kiss. It shows just how much the director is really devoted to this season.
You have to pay a lot of attention to get all these details right.
Yes.
Like everything's right. So because everything's right, that means that somebody had to painstakingly realize these dialogues, these scenes, the blocking of the episode, storyboarding or directing it, just being like scripting it out. I mean, it takes a lot to be like, okay, this is what is in the light novel. This is what I have to show, when, how, the performance wise, making sure everything's depicted properly. There's not a moment that's like, we can't show this here, or we shouldn't, do this here. Everything is in the episode.
Because even in when I've noticed like actual like dialogue differences, it wasn't in a negative way, and it was like, oh, we've adjusted this to make this feel appropriate for the scene, right?
Yeah, like Otto's whole
spiel.
Spiel at the beginning, exactly.
Yeah.
Or like, I don't actually know how accurate this is because I didn't read the light novel for this section, but Garfield, or Subaru's response to Garfield's fight to Reinhardt in the hallway feels like it was consolidated from something, but it just hits everything you needed to hit too.
Yeah. And if there's one thing I will definitely praise this episode for, it's being efficient. I didn't feel like there was wasted time. I didn't feel like there was a moment where I was like, guys, this is dragging out too long, or oh my god, that was way too short. What are you doing?
The example of this that it comes clearest to my mind is the funniest example, which is when both Liliana and Subaru have finished rapping at each other and are going to Amelia in the meeting. They start talking, and then the next scene is, wow, so you told me all about, like, it was like, I forgot who, I think Liliana was like, oh, and now we're here. We talked all that time, and now we're here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was very funny, because it's like, I distinctly now think about it, I'm like, I bet you if I go back to the light novel, there's an entire, like, 50-word discussion she and 50 back and forth
Yeah,
sentence
where she's
structure.
just pissing him off and annoying
Yeah,
Subaru
and
and
you
the
don't
reader.
need to see
That's
that. Yeah.
honestly what I think. It's that scene that makes so much of the like novel community dislike her so much. It's because it just
Yeah,
drags.
Yeah, it just
exactly.
drags on, and it's unnecessary. But that was a really good consolidation of that moment, in my opinion. It was also great because we got to see the important aspects of her annoying Subaru right before it's impactful and happens. Right, like we get it concise. Oh, so this is who you are. You're this legendary hero. I'm gonna make a song about you. Boom, concise. And then, oh, you are the great little girl user. And then we get that through line, which I imagine probably made so many anime onlys like drop their jaw. Just like, what? She called him what?
Such a foul name.
It
Like
is.
Lolimancer is a fun like in community joke for like the English translation for this.
Yeah.
But they're not saying that at all. Because that Loli is a word that Subaru and then I think eventually Beatrice uses, but really no one else. So that's not going to be like his rumored name. Little girl user, as in like necromancer would be life and death user.
Yes.
For example, in this, it's so brutal. It's just such a brutal name for him. But I mean, it's deserved. He does use the little girl, same way Amelia uses spirits.
I'm kind the thing I'm now realizing as we're talking about this all again, like it's just I'm so happy ReZero's back, man. Like because you always get you always get those moments, right, of like you're just like you retrospectively think like am I just biased sometimes? Like am I just too deep into this? Like is it actually a 7 out of 10 when I believe it to be a 10 out of 10, you know? But watching this episode again just reinforced me, man, I'm just right about this. This is peak. I love this. We're not even into the deep nitty gritty yet, and oh my god, man, I can't keep my eyes off the screen. When I went to rewatch this episode for the first time in months since AX, I sat down earlier and I was ready to watch it, and at first I was like, you know, I don't know how good I'm going to have to pay attention to stuff, because normally when I rewatch stuff, it's really hard for me to. But as soon as I clicked play, I noticed immediately within the first 2 minutes, I stopped looking at the episode timer, just sat back and stared at my screen for a good hour and a half and just let it pass.
Yeah, the only time I was checking the episode was making sure that I was going to be here in time for this
Yes,
to
exactly.
go through it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I don't want to skip out on any of it. Sean, you liked Moppet Mage? I mean, kudos to you. I mean, but man, that was not liked in the community at all. Ugh. What did Asia Muse translate it? Kitty Mancer? Oh, that also sounds awful.
Oh,
Yeah, we can't be
that's
saying that.
foul.
Yeah.
You can't say that. You can't type that down. Honestly, it's one of those things in which I think it's a cultural thing as well, because I mean, obviously, like in Japan, like the term lolly is sometimes used playfully, right? But like in America, the discourse is pretty rightfully only done in a judgmental manner. So I do think about it. It's like it's half playful in the show, but also it's like little kid user is meant to be more,
Literal.
clear that it's not just them teasing him. It's like, oh
Yeah.
wait, maybe I shouldn't. And it makes it make more sense for the English audience why he's like, oh, this isn't the cultural thing. This is like him actually feeling offended by this.
Yeah, because this is the thing, right? I think in a way, the directly stating what he is more like it hits more as not only as an insult, but a like. One thing I really enjoy about this episode, as we're talking about this in particular to align with this, is the continuity of Subaru as a character. Like, because it hits for me a bit more watching this episode of Subaru's developing and changing, but he's still a fucking goofball that makes so many mistakes. Like the moment where the crowd throws stuff at him for ruining Liliana's song, and it tied up with him being so mad about like the little girl user allegations.
Or man, I really appreciated your brother's wicked piercing eyes and his
cynical,
loving smile.
Yeah, it's just he's such a shit talker, and I love it. And also reinforcing the like as a main character, him having the bad habit of speaking out loud and ruining things is for the audience's benefit, but also is a really consistent and fun character trope for him.
Yeah, but also ruining things literally blew up in his face in this
Yeah,
episode with
literally blew up.
Kiritaka throwing a stone at him.
Can I just say the voice actor of Kiritaka did such a good fucking job of making that scene make me fucking roll my socks off, just be like, oh my god, he knew my Liliana. Like,
Mhm.
It's so funny
glorious.
hearing Reinhardt's voice actor now that I know that he is Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen.
Oh, that adds like 5 planes of pressure onto my brain. What?
Yeah. It's very apt because now I think that guy gets typecasted
As
a little
OP.
bit as OP. Yeah, he's OP typecasted.
I
Um,
felt the same when I was watching AOT and realized that Zeke was played by Roswell.
yeah, I mean,
Yes.
if you watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, you know Roswell's
Yeah,
voice
he's
actor is
Dio,
Dio.
but
Dio.
that was like a fun fact I had known, but like Roswell, I'd already finished season 2 when I went back, and like season 4 of AOT came out in its entirety, and
Or
just hearing Zeke like, oh, it is Roswell, and as well as
yeah,
a few others like Ri Takahashi appearing in everything, and you just
right.
Everything. Yeah.
Felix's voice actress is also another cat girl in Monogatari, and it is very funny because now I'm like, why is there only play cat girls? Also, um, Heinkel's voice actor, I don't know, it sounds very familiar to me, but he does a great job, is what I
I
was gonna say.
I when it I guess that's the thing we could talk about a bit about the new characters, like their voice acting in particular, right? Because that's probably a bit more front and center. I guess we'd
Mhm.
start with Heinkel, right?
Yeah. So his VA is Kenjiro Tsuda, I think it is.
Yes, I believe so.
Oh, he plays Nanami, that's why. Okay.
Mhm.
He does. That is where I recognize his voice from. Oh my, that might genuinely be a perfect casting. Oh wow.
Yeah, it fits the
Yeah, Sean's reinforcing that it's Nanami.
yeah bummish voice. It's good. Um, yeah, I mean he's just a really great voice. Can't really say I would think of any other voice casting for him that is probably perfect as well. Nanami's voice actor does such a great job in Jujutsu Kaisen
Yes.
um, that yeah, I have no doubt that Heinkel perhaps in the future will have some great moments. I mean, even in this arc, he'll have great moments. So
Because the thing also is, especially for Heinkel, which I think I remember someone in chat way back, like at the start of the stream, talking about this, and I have to agree that they really liked that he wasn't like a shouty alcoholic type, because he is the alcoholic stumbly type, right? But in a more like monotone and sad way than like and bitter way than like an angry shouty way, right?
Hmm.
And it really comes across in like a lot of his monotone, because for the majority of how he's speaking, it's monotone and like slurred, right? Obviously with the alcoholism and stuff. But then whenever he's getting really emotional, it's always him having a bitter, like subtly angry moment. Whenever he's like throwing shade at Wilhelm or Reinhard, you can feel the daggers in his voice, and he just does such a good job of making you dislike this fucker.
I did recognize him as Hannes from Attack on Titan as well, who is the friendly
Oh,
drunken
oh
dad
right,
figure
right.
in that one.
yes, that bro. Everyone's getting typecasted, eh?
Hmm. He just gets to show up to work drunk and gets a bigger paycheck for it.
It's all my character work, you know.
It's what my character would do.
Pass the sake over.
Yeah, sad drunk,
Sad drunk,
exactly.
exactly. Yes.
I mean, in our podcast episodes about Arc 7 and other ones that we've talked about characters like Reinhardt's one, we've brought up Heinkel before and like our changing opinions of him. I think it's going to be
Yes.
coming up again in our next podcast episode
Oh
if
yeah.
I get my
Yeah.
way.
So honestly, in an impression of people who haven't seen that, we can't really talk too much, but this episode doesn't play in flatteringly at all, obviously. But that's to be expected. But let's just say that I'm excited to see him in a way.
And also, maybe another thing is just a lot of characters in ReZero are multi-dimensional and are very good at emulating people from real life, where people aren't necessarily good or evil. Some people are more bad and more good than others, but there's a wiggle room. There's grey, right? And that is true for the majority of the characters in this series. So expect to see loads of different sides of these new characters that you probably won't expect, like, at all.
But you can be extremely angry at him for this
Yes.
episode and interrupting the almost
Oh,
renewed relationship
oh,
between Reinhard and Wilhelm,
oh my
who
god.
apparently people didn't know were related. They just never pieced together that the red-haired
Yeah.
character named Van Estrella might be related to the guy who was married to the red-haired
Van
woman,
Estrella.
Van Estrella.
What's very funny about this to me is because we don't have the inner dialogue of the author or exposition at all. But in the anime's context, this is the first time anybody's actually ever said, "Oh, these people, their names, they're actually the same." They're actually grandfather and grandson, like pure like that. Because literally, like people I've seen who's watched the first season straight through, right? No breaks, no episode by episode,
Mhm.
saw their names and did not put together that they were related. And I was just like, oh,
Well, because you only get Reinhard Van Estrella's like full proper name like
during like
once in
17.
episode. I think it's like twice in episode 4,
Yeah,
and that's it.
And then it's
that's
near the
true.
end of the first season where you learn more about Wilhelm and Teresia.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Reinhard van Estrella. That gets in my head very easy.
Oh,
I
I love.
so I'll never forget the name.
One of my favorite lines of dialogue in the series actually showed. I noticed it. I noticed maybe strange to be one of my favorite lines of dialogue because it's such a specific and strange moment. But it's where Subaru incorrectly adds the Van title to Heinkel, and he immediately believes back in this episode of the Van. Van isn't in my name. It's just Heinkel Estrella. I was not worthy to be given that title, or something along those lines, right?
Yeah,
And
well, we learn a decent amount with Heingel. Like, there's that, and the fact that he like controls the Estrella estate still.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
because he's the heir to the Estrella family. Reinhard isn't. It skipped a generation, right? Like,
So that's interesting drama. Of course, they're here because, actually, this is something that I think about, and it's like, do you think that the reason for them being here makes much sense? This is something that I was thinking about. I was
Like the
like,
Priscilla camp being here.
no, I mean like she does whatever. No, that's
oh,
not
what
the point.
everyone gathering here?
Yeah, like everyone's gathering here, and Anastasia's like, yeah, we'll get you a new crystal. I know somebody who has a crystal. Come here. Gluttony. I know things about gluttony. Come here.
Well,
And yeah.
well,
I think it ties back to what Otto was talking about during
yes.
his exposition moment, where Anastasia at this point in time is in the clear lead for winning the royal selection. That she started out with an advantage and has had no setbacks, only victories so far.
Right.
So,
I
with
guess so.
that in mind, Anastasia reaching out to the three people who she doesn't see as a threat and getting them to have an alliance or be more on her side for whatever reason possible, in her words, just to make it easier to work together.
It's
I think that does make more sense. I remember in the web novel, it felt like she had just reached out randomly to the three of them. And I assume that it was sort of implied that this was the reason, but letting Otto explain and like give so much emphasis for it was
Yeah.
her and Krush who were the clear front runners.
yeah,
The scheme.
because
Yeah, and then Krush has lost a huge chunk of support because of the memory issues.
because
Yeah, 100%.
as you see in season 1, I think I want to emphasize this a bit as well. This isn't just Anastasia wants to, because she doesn't see these people as a threat, doesn't want to make them, makes them work together better. This is a point of leverage, and you can clearly see it in the way her voice acting, and like the facial expressions you do in this episode of whenever she's at the table, like especially with the moment with revealing like, oh, I've got the information about gluttony to Subaru, right? She's playing with them because even though she doesn't see them as a threat now, if they do become a threat and she has leverage on them, that can secure her position in the race.
Well, it's
Yeah.
also why she didn't send the gluttony information to the Amelia King,
Yes,
because that
exactly.
wasn't relevant to the actual rival. Even though the group would have been interested, Amelia's focus was getting or I guess Anastasia's focus was getting Amelia in debt for that stone.
Right. Also, one thing that I want to point out is how, like always, like we were talking about Liliana, I Anastasia feels more tangible here than ever before, and it makes me think, oh, maybe she is slightly okay as a character. Like, and that's just me with things I know in the
Nicole.
future. But like one of the things that I've had a hard time gripping onto Anastasia position in the story, right? Um, but like seeing her here, like it makes her seem like she has an actual personality, which isn't just like, you read so much subtext into the story where like, is she even like, does she actually have fun at all? Does she actually care about anybody? Is she actually charismatic at all? You know, and
Mm-hmm.
that sort of war that's going on in your mind when you're reading her dialogue is like hard to parse. But through this, you see that she's actually kind of charming. She's actually controls the flow of the conversation very well. You know, she has an elegant way about her, and you don't get that impression very well, even in the first season. Instead, it's just sort of like, oh, I've taken you for everything you have, that type of thing.
He also timed their arrivals like very specifically so that the discussion about gluttony wouldn't come up until everyone is there and relaxed and like committed to being there. Uh, but I mean, it's not a secret that the three of us here are not Anastasia's biggest fans, and even though this made her feel like more of an actual character in the story for sure, I mean, I still don't like her. This has just made me distrust her even more. Like, I genuinely can't wait
Well,
for
obviously.
psychiatrist Ed, who's
Yes.
notoriously recently become a huge sus of Anastasia and wondering if she's in ties with the witches cult. To see her get that overshadowed phase where she looks actively malicious.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, or her knowing random facts about where gluttony is. It's like, huh, that seems weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cause
So it's
yeah, cause
we'll have to see what Anastasia comes with. I mean, there's tiny hints to some stuff about her in this episode if you're eagle-eyed. I remember we pointed out after the premiere as well.
yeah. I you know, I'll tell you what. I don't. My I will say this episode has alleviated some of my worry in terms of her writing as a character. Not fully, but I still actively dislike her as a person. Probably the most out of all of the candidates, without a doubt. Still, we'll probably plug this in. Our Royal Selection podcast debate is a really good ReZero podcast episode, and if you haven't seen it yet, you should do yourself the favor of seeing it, because Connor did an amazing setup for it, and it's one of the most fun, like, formatted episodes of the podcast so far. It's so silly and goofy, and it's great.
And the only spoiler in that was covered in this episode, so
Yes, so
you're all set if you're anime only for that one. It's great. So like we can kind of speak to the other candidates then. So like we learn more on everyone's successes. Like with Felt, we see that she's been gathering like-minded people to her cause, and we get like a brief view of her, which I think has a lot of references to some of the side content about her camp. Like there are some characters that are exclusive to her side stories in like the one shot of everyone in her group together.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Those characters are interesting. I mean, we'll probably learn more about them in the future.
One thing I loved about this episode was we got Schultz dialogue, boys.
Yes, Schultz is
right?
so
It's
sweet.
funny.
And it was so cute.
And now that I think about it, we're going to get more Schultz scenes throughout this entire season. So
Mm-hmm. Just don't worry, Al-sama. I'll get Heinkel-sama out.
dragging him.
Sorry,
yeah.
Heinkel-sama. You hear like his body thudding against the floor because he has to keep.
How's that little boy so strong?
I adore this kid already. I've only had Schultz for an episode and a half, but if anything ever happened to him, I would kill everyone in this room and myself.
Yeah, exactly. I love Schultz so much.
I remember when I was reading this part in the arc, and Schultz exists, right? And you're like, who is this named character? And you don't actually get, I won't say much, but like the idea of him as a character doesn't really exist in your brain. But as you start like realizing, like, oh, I want to touch on this just because this is something I can talk about generally. It's amazing how he writes like kid characters. Teppei does, and writes them all in distinct and interesting way, so they all have their own unique personalities, because that's hard to do. it's hard to give them a very gentle like in way like it's hard to make them distinctive in a way that's thoughtful but also interesting to a reader because a lot of people are just like kids are supposed to be cute and pathetic and sometimes annoying and that's about it but
Well,
like
because
every kid in the story so far has had a very interesting and fun and unique like bent or desire or goal, you know.
yeah, and like with kind of on that note, even the people who are all the same age, there's just vastly different levels of maturity that all still feel realistic for them.
Yes.
'Cause, like Felt, Garfield, and what is the first one? Mimi are all
Yeah,
about 15 years old here.
the same age
But
around.
different scales of maturity here.
Yeah, where somehow Garfield feels like the most mature out of all of them, despite last
100%.
season, like it focusing on how he acted like a middle schooler. This episode, he feels like he embodies this world's concept of 15 years old makes you an adult.
Yeah, but he's also bigger than the rest of them, obviously. But also, just the way that his mentality and his desires are, it feels like a adult sort of conundrum. Like there are people better than me in my field, and I have to. And he's also very, dutiful. Like he's lived a very dignified life where he feels like he's had taken on a lot of responsibility. So that makes it very obvious that he seems a lot more mature for his age.
And
Mhm.
I think there's the added thing of, man, he has PTSD because that's the first person he killed, right?
Yeah,
Like,
as a
Yeah.
14-year-old boy, he had to kill someone,
and
which
even
is
though he was, I would say, completely within his right to do that in that moment, uh, she, that's still a thing of like, this was an awful, terrible person, but I can't forget about her because I killed someone.
Yeah, and also like we'll see later on in the season. Mimi's character is also I kind of understand what you mean in this episode. They seem like ill matched for maturity, but what we see that Mimi is sort of in the similar position that Garf is in is pretty obvious, right? Like they're
Mhm.
both like fighters for candidates for the throne. They're both around the same age. And like Mimi, of course, is a lot more playful, but we start seeing that she has a lot of responsibility and she's very, I would say like responsible. Like she's very level headed.
Yeah, I I think the coolest thing I noticed while rewatching this episode, and I don't know if you agree with this, Connor, is especially with the mannerisms and stuff. I didn't realize how much Garfield was imitating Subaru in a lot of these scenes. So in the scenes where he's talking to the kid, he's doing Subaru's like finger pose up in the air to do as his hero pose.
Yes, I mean it's his idea. Subaru
Yeah.
rescued him, saved the entire sanctuary and the mansion at the same time. When Garfield is fighting Elsa, he's talking about how Subaru is like the biggest badass in the world. He's not going to back down from anything. It cuts to Subaru saying, "Run away, run away,
Run
run
away,
away,
run
run
away.
away."
Yeah.
But that is Garfield's impression of Subaru. So just like we get Amelia doing the Subaru pose when she starts her trial, when
Yeah.
Garfield gets to embody what he feels like he's learned and gotten from Subaru after a year spent together, where we even learned in the beginning that he and Garfield are the only two that use that exercise, the obstacle course together. Like they're the only ones who quote unquote know about it or call it like the secret base. So they clearly hang out a lot and do a lot. And I'm so happy getting to see Garfield just be the super cool older brother figure to all those kids and maybe the actual older brother to the last two that we see
Dun
there.
dun
That's true.
dun.
It's funny. I always think these names are very funny. Raphael and Fred. It's
Hmm.
very and they're like gender swapped who they're named of.
Mom didn't
Um,
have a lot of ideas.
yeah, I mean, obviously we'll get to it later, but yeah, mom is there, and it makes sense why Garf is a little bit disgruntled in the moment. I'd say. We'll see if there's any interactions that we've missed between the two of them, because obviously it cuts away from that scene, and then we get this
The next
crazy
morning.
ending that kind of we kind of get this crazy moment that kind of overshadows that like lingering thread until they decide to pick back up on it, which they definitely probably will.
It's
Um,
it's really cool because I think I'm just really happy with how they've been handling the adaptation so far. To a degree of like we could even talk about because Sean here was saying, I love Garfield, Otto, and Subaru's relationship. Who doesn't love the three idiots, right? The three bros. Like they have that brotherhood, and I would say they cut a decent amount of that content out of this episode, but it didn't feel like that relationship was missing to me. I mean, even that, I think it was like a 30-second scene where Subaru and Garfield are teasing a drinking Otto while he's trying to become vulnerable with them because he's drunk.
Yeah, they establish a lot of. I mean, with the time that they use it to establish all the relationship dynamics that are important to know going
Yes.
forward. And there's sometimes that are like redundant, but they've kind of trimmed all that redundant scenes into, they pruned it down to only include a lot of these scenes once. I mean, we talked about before. There's sometimes where they repeat a bit of exposition here or there. Um, but yeah, I think it's very wise. Like for example, like I could tell there's a lot of deft editing and stuff like this. I don't know if it's exactly like this in the web novel or light novel. For example, when they're like Garf is like, yeah, my name is Gorgeous Tiger, it cuts straight to Subaru saying gorgeous about the food. So now
Yes.
you know where he gets the word gorgeous tiger. Like you can imply that. It's not like in exposition you'd have to write that down in like the margins of a story, but like in anime you have to try to communicate it. That's a very nice way to show and not telling it that he
We
gets
also
that name from Subaru. Yeah.
we also get to see Garfield's relationship with Otto and like their specific dynamic on the boat ride as well, where when he's freaking out about, I'm
Yeah.
guessing not being able to swim is like the actual concern that he has rather than
Yeah.
just being like a
Yeah,
wet
because
cat.
he obviously never.
He's gripped onto Otto's cloak like a kid would with their parent, and Otto is just laughing off the situation. So it's clearly not crazy for him to imagine that Garfield is reliant or coming to him for that, even though Otto is kind of the not weakest of the bunch. He has his own power, but in their dynamic, it feels like he's often at the bottom of the totem pole, lowest rung of the
Yes.
ladder. But they clearly all support and rely on him. I mean, I've never really thought about what the title Internal Affairs Minister really means, but it means that he's handling everything internally. He's in charge of them as a group, which is crazy to think that Subaru thinks that's what Ratchen's job is, which
Yeah.
I call it
Yeah,
this
I was about to
episode.
say. I was
Yeah.
like, what is that the case? I'm not thinking about it. I'm like, if that's the case, then I don't know.
I don't know, man. I feel like there's some logistical problems.
It's very funny because I think the truth is that with Reinhardt's disposition, that he's the internal affairs minister,
as well.
and
Yeah.
yeah, it's not just that he's the strongest person. His personality lends him to mediating situations. So yeah, I think that's because I bet you Reinhardt forced them to come here. I don't think Felt would come here unless Reinhardt said, "Hey, you should come." So
Well,
yeah,
did we hear what Anastasia's offer to Felt was?
no, I don't think
No,
we did.
we did not.
Yeah.
So I don't think she would have come if there wasn't a reason for her to be here. Honestly,
Right.
like Reinhardt could physically move her, but it does not seem like that is what their
That's
dynamic
true. She's a
actually
bit
is.
willful. She sees the chains out of her outfit that Reinhardt picks for her. I wonder
Yeah,
what
and when
outfit
put on
that
half a.
Reinhardt once felt aware
Uh,
that she didn't want to wear.
we had speculated that he got her probably like a Lagunican nobility or official's outfit because half of her outfit is the top half of a knight's undershirt, like the one that my model has on right now. If you cut this off at the midriff, that is the main shirt she has on
Oh
underneath
right,
like the
right.
skirt and the vest. So we're guessing that he gave her like a night suit or something, like official and traveling gear, quote unquote, whatever. And she just went to town, destroyed it, and got a bunch of extra stuff to throw on it for
Yeah.
herself, which, it works for her,
It's a really
apparently.
cute design. Way better than the previous one, may I add.
The previous one is what happens when you have 3 copper pieces to spend on your entire month.
Exactly. But I really like the blue colored scarf, like contrasting against her red eyes. It's just a really cool color contrast.
It is because like red feels more like Priscilla's camp's
Yes.
color theme to it.
I also realized something about the eyes of characters in the first seasons and stuff like that. They're a lot more lifeless. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's not as much dynamicism. They all have the same type of eyes. Here,
Mm-hmm.
they're a lot more expressive, I would say.
Because I felt before in season 1 and season 2, it wasn't that like, because they could be expressive sometimes, but it was almost like in a lot of scenes that would be the static thing for characters, right? Like, it would be regardless of how their body or their face is moving, their eyes would be pretty static within the scene, unless it's Subaru. But that's because Subaru has his own like, in my headcanon, his own team working on his own facial expressions. But for a lot of
Yeah,
characters,
probably.
I remember Reinhard's scenes in particular of just his eyes. Like there were two states. There was either serious looking Reinhard eyes or like just those very
Casual
relaxed,
Reinhard.
casual Reinhard. Yeah, we don't get to see the range of emotions that we get there.
Like there's one shot in this episode where it's almost like an under the chin shot of Reinhard when he's blocking Garfield. So you're like
Yes.
looking up at his face and he just has this very innocent, unassuming look, just like, wow, really? Hey, it's good to see you. I stopped his punch in time, thank goodness.
But it's
And it felt like rightfully calls it out as
condescending.
condescending, like fake modesty or whatever she was calling it to him. Just like, thank you. None of his stuff ever feels genuine, and that really comes across with the way that they're animating him this time.
And it's great too. I mean, I want to. One of my favorite moments of the episode is the contrasting shot when Heinkel enters and ruins the scene between Wilhelm and Reinhard, and you get that moment where it's them sitting, but they're sitting in like different positions, but like the camera aligns them a little,
Mm-hmm.
and you see their faces like both downturned, but in the different directions, and you see Reinhard's face like covered in shadow and completely expressionless, and you're like, wow, what? Maybe even 0.01% of Reinhard that was there got thrown away in that moment, and Soul Saint is back out.
I love that breakfast scene so much. I
Yes.
honestly I forgot the butt of the joke or the two different jokes in that scene where it starts with Amelia perfectly flipping one of these things, then it shows that she has completely ruined it and that Beatrice has also destroyed hers, and then it cuts across to Reinhardt who has a stack of 6 on Felt's
doing
plate
a million
already.
of them, yeah.
And is one-handed making 4 more. I just want to imagine like anyone who sees that for the first time thinking, "Oh, what's Reinhardt's new power now? Perfect pancake making?" And like, probably.
But you know what's very funny? People actually don't intrinsically know that he has powers like that yet.
Yeah, it's probably going to be like, what can't this guy do? Like,
Yeah.
what isn't he good at?
Yeah.
Which same thing to get across for it.
Because another thing about it, people are going to 100% understand Reinhardt's power by the end of this season, which will, like be interesting. Because I think missing that gives a lot of, there's a lack of context between a lot of these characters, and I think there's a lot of ways to flesh them out throughout this arc and adaptation that I hope they really go for. Even just slight lines or slight, flashbacks, flashback scene, quick ones should do it. But the arc itself does a good job of doing it anyway, so it's not really huge
Yeah.
deal.
If anyone at home is curious on Reinhardt's power system, it is explained twice in official side anime content. In that it is explained in ReZero Break Time, which is like a little chibi format show. I think Crunchyroll calls it ReZero Shorts or something. And it's also explained in Isekai Quartet season
Yes.
2, I think. It might be season 1. Where in both cases they go over his powers that he has and the ridiculousness that his powers are. But as Gold said, that should be one of the things that's explained this season as well, if you just want to wait for it. Just know, if you've ever watched a bad isekai and thought, man, that main character is boring because he's so overpowered, Reinhardt sees that and thinks, oh, that's cute, and moves on from there.
Yeah, Reinhard squints in that and is like, wow, he's so. Is he really?
That's overpowered?
Yeah. And it's really entertaining because I think people are not going to be ready for some of the fights this season, man. People are not going to be ready for like some of the spectacle things we're going to see. It's
I
Yeah,
agree.
we shouldn't go too deep into
too
that,
deep.
though.
We won't go too
No,
deep
no,
into
no.
that.
Just know that you're going to get excited. This season deserved to be animated rather than read.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, I mean, I've heard some interesting things about famous webgen animators directing episodes of this season, so
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
it's
That's
interesting.
really
I
cool.
think there's going to be a lot better animation than ever before in ReZero, if such things are true. But also, people probably be like, "Oh, this is off model" or whatever. I think
Yeah.
it'll come up
The-
to that at some point.
For this
But
1 microsecond, the shading of the ears is inconsistent.
yeah, stuff like that, because I know that people have stylistic stuff that'll make it very obvious that a different animators from outside the studio are working on it. But this episode felt very um, tightly packed to the point where I'm like, I think everybody who worked in anime on this is a White Fox regular. I don't think
Oh yeah.
they hired anybody on or anything like that for this.
Aside from the character designer who was hired on for this season.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Who does a
Uh,
great job.
Yeah. I think that's probably a good point to transition into like the last major topic from this episode, which
Yep.
is our climax scene here with
Oh!
Sirius Romani Conti in the Malice of Theater, theatrical malice. So there was a lot of build up for the scene, not just in the episode, but in the community as well. I'm glad it delivered for
Oh.
not just us, but it seems like the vast majority of people. I hope no one was confused about what was happening to Subaru there. On the rewatch, I think it was a little bit more clear than I thought it was during
Yeah,
the
it's pretty
premiere.
obvious. Yeah.
I think it's very obvious. It, you'd have to be like the most casual of watchers and just not
Like
understand.
initially, I could understand people being like, "What? What is he? Why is he like that? Why is he
Yeah,
acting like that?"
initially that makes sense, but at the end of that scene, it's very clear what's going on, right? Like,
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I'm most looking forward to in like any reactions or highlight
yeah.
clips of people seeing this for the first time is recognizing like why is he just he's hypnotized, like the screen's going fuzzy, their eyes are turned red. Why are they all cheering for him? Did she say her name was Sirius Romani Conti? That's crazy. What does that mean? And I've seen one like a new watcher on r/anime that I know was new because they were going through the rewatch series on that for like their first time through the series. Did pick up on Sirius's design elements for a very popular fan theory.
Ooh.
You might notice that she has some similarities to other people around if you really clue into everything about her. Uh, Something that's kind of interesting to note, they didn't make Sirius as androgynous as I think the web novel initially set her up to
Yeah,
be.
it implies like
Yes.
it says it a whole bunch, and I guess the issue is I don't think the artist of the novels did care much about that instruction
When
as
is he
well.
ever?
What is
Yeah.
it?
So at that point, I guess there's no real helping it. But yeah, initially in the novel, they've said the word androgynous was used maybe 5, 6, 7 times,
Yeah.
but it's like at some point you just have to take the L and say that never mind,
It
right? Like, yeah.
I mean,
think-
you don't have to. Throughout the entirety of the Attack on Titan manga, they never addressed the gender
Hanji,
of
yeah.
Hanji.
But that's like a little bit different because her entire design is like there's parts of it. Every character doesn't say a gender term for her name. The entire series, I don't think. So that's the thing as well. It's pretty up there as well. And like I'm pretty sure there's even scenes in the anime where it's like Hanji is like there's like that is talked about.
The anime
So-
did decide just to address it and make Hanji female, but I know in the manga they never did it.
Yeah.
Because
So it's just I thought it was an interesting point that because of how involved Tappei was with this production, that he must have just greenlight the decision to scrap that aspect of the character.
I think it was a part of the character, at least in my opinion, a part of the character that didn't really feel like it had much purpose. It was there to set mystique, but it didn't have
Well,
anything
as soon as
deeper to
yeah.
that, right?
as soon as the design was given, I think the mystique was over, right?
Yeah.
It was like, oh, there's a different type of mystique there.
yeah,
Initially, I think it's like if at any point the narration ever said something about rounded ears and stuff like that, and up to that point there was no drawing of Sirius the entire time, the androgyny would make it more mysterious, I guess, like what their deal is supposed to be or what the point of this character was supposed to be, because it's like you might not even ever guess it. And usually a lot of the mysteries in ReZero are obfuscated or rather hard to grasp. So I think this is a mystery that's almost way too obvious what you're supposed to fixate on. I think Tepe didn't want it to happen that fast. I think he wanted it to be paced out better. So now I think he's probably going to change what the mystery is just
Yeah,
my
Yeah,
feeling about it.
I would agree with that because I think
that's
retrospectively from his perspective, right? He's like, okay, yeah, that was not subtle enough at it. It's fair enough to think, okay, I don't need this element if I'm either going to change the destination or like it's pointless to include this detail at this point.
right. So we got to see. Did she claim her sin in this one? She did, right?
Yeah, Wrath. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wrath. Wrath do this horrible presentation in front of all these onlookers. Point out that a few of them weren't cooperating right away, including Subaru, as well as just a few other randoms. And then pull off a terrible Lion King impression with what's it, Luspel,
yeah,
and it's just such a haunting scene. But every detail is perfect on it as you're this building unease with this new track that's just going crazy with the. I always called them the Roswell horns or the Roswell strings,
yeah,
where it's just like
yeah.
that clown music in the background. But it just gets so uncomfortable. Like I can still
I
feel
love
my
those.
skin crawling.
But the way the music comes across, it's like puppets on strings is how I'm feeling, right? Which is obviously to go the theater of malice, right? Like it gets that feeling of like she's pulling these puppet strings, like, and it's scary. It's in a way like chaotic and gestury, but not in a way that's funny, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the score is great. I think one thing I really appreciated about the scene, which I don't know how other people feel about it, but I think this scene did a really good job of showing enough of what you visually see of how these deaths happen, so you understand what's going on, but not using like shock value and going overly gory in a really gross way.
Yeah, because it doesn't like focus on what's happening to Luspel as he dies. It focuses and switches that to Subaru to show the damage being done,
Yeah,
which I'm grateful for. I don't like to see kids being brutally murdered on screen.
yeah, it's not great for the mental health. It's also one of those things too of like it doesn't. That is a way of like I don't necessarily call it censorship. I'd say that's just a way more
It's
better
tact,
way
it's
to
taste.
tact, yeah, to address that sort of thing. And I hope that's the sort of direction they continue to go with the violence in the show going forward, because I think that would be a much better way to do it instead of the black shadows in places where they shouldn't be, like in season one.
Yeah, with Petra's missing eyes.
Petra's missing eyes, yeah.
I think tact is a good way to put it. I think one thing interesting about this series is I think something that people don't realize is that there's a lot of care and detail done in between the way in which things are depicted. So like it's not a shock value series. People say that, like I'm not like boxing at Ghost. I'm not going to, but people criticize ReZero just by saying it's edgy or whatever.
Yeah,
But I don't think like every piece of violence, every piece of like sadness, every piece of like emotional drama feels done in the most succinct and delicate way possible. I never think that Pei's ever. He's been very careful about depicting things in proper ways.
I think yeah, because to pay a thing that very much comes across in his creative process is these. You have to approach it from a view of empathy, right? These are terrible things happening to, in this universe, people, right? So when Subaru's dying, that is Subaru dying. Like, it's not a thing of like, oh, I'm seeing this happen, it's not fully hitting you. Subaru is experiencing the pain and trauma of death. These people are getting hurt. And you're not being entertained by seeing that, you're being entertained by seeing the emotional fallout and them developing from that, right?
Mm-hmm. As well as just the build up to it, because
Yes.
that tension is like when you're on a roller coaster and you're just knowing you're about to let all of that out. But in this case, it's letting it all out to see something horrible. But that is quintessential ReZero. Like Tapei's experience as a butcher shines through when he's brutalizing Subaru. Right, exactly. As Eminem says, it's
Yes.
gory. It's not gore porn. It's not torture
Exactly.
porn for this.
Exactly. Which is something I really appreciate about the series, because Tapei approaches all of his characters with at least most of his characters, with empathy and kindness in a way that really makes you as the audience approach that from that direction too, of like, how would I feel in this situation if I was this person? How would I feel, right? Like in their shoes. It does a really good job of doing that. I think it's also there are times where, you don't have to like Super and you don't have to like ReZero, but there are times when you see the complaints in Season 1 and Season 2 of like, man, this guy's such a bitch, I wouldn't feel this way.
Why isn't he more powerful?
Yeah.
Where's his power-ups?
I'm always
Where's
like,
his magic?
I'm always like, wow, there's a lot of lack of empathy going on there, right? Like,
If I were him, I would just let Julius kill me in the arena 3,000 times until I learn every one of his moves.
And also, it's one of those things where it's like paying attention, right? It's detail understanding, right? Like even if you're like, that's not me, the fact that it's not you means that you have to understand who this person is, right? If you can't reflect that on, then you aren't learning the lessons that he's learning, right? And one thing that people don't realize is that, I mean, I thought about this before, and it's like Subaru's journey of being authentic is something that is meant to be messy, and people aren't used to that sort of uncomfortable feeling when they watch somebody fail or whatever.
Like the
this isn't necessarily what it's about, but what I'm saying is that like the writing style Teppei does is unconventional, because I think that people don't realize that like there is a lot of it's not even subversion, it's just very gentle and considerate lessons that he's trying to teach people.
Yeah, and if there was any lesson to take from this episode, it's Season 3's in really good hands, and I cannot wait for Episode 2.
100%,
oh my
100%.
God. Guys, I cannot wait to talk fresh ReZero stuff next week again with like Episode 2 and
fresh stuff that we all don't know.
All don't know. Yeah, like we're all coming at it of like, wow, we've just watched this for the first time. How do we feel? Because that's
and that the French didn't leak.
Yeah, the French.
Honestly, I'm just relieved it wasn't us in LAX that
and
at AX that leaked the thing. It gives me hope for the future. But I think
maybe they come back,
yeah, maybe for the Arc 6 announcement or however. Who knows?
Wink, wink.
But I think that's a good point to stop for this week.
Yeah,
I'm very happy with this one.
Overall, final rating for the episode out of 10?
I would say, for what it is, I would say it's a 10.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think this is one of the few episodes in the series I'm giving a full 10 out of 10. It's everything it needs to be and more. I'm very happy with it.
Like, literally could not be more satisfied with this, I think, personally.
All right, I think that's where we'll leave it off. We'll talk to you all next time.
See you next week, guys. Get ready for more ReZero, because we're going to be making lots of content about it, and I'm really excited, and I hope you guys are too. Have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are, if you're watching this up to this point, and
or morning for that one of you who I saw was watching this at 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah, which is terrifying. Goodbye.